Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm going to do some watercoloring today using a new to me stamp set from Mama Elephant called Botanic Hello. I believe that's what it's called. Anyway, and I'm going to first heat emboss this with some white embossing powder. I'm using a Stampin' Up! Embossing powder, and I'm using this little stamp press thing. And I'm using a anti-static powder tool. This is the one I think by Woodware, and it's just a bag of powder. Basically, you could use corn flour as well and do the same thing. It just takes all the static cling, and it takes all the any oils that might have been on the card from your hands. Even if even if they got clean hands, there's still oils within your hands, and it just takes that away, so that when you ink up with your Versamark ink, which is like a clear sticky ink, it's kind of like a glue ink if you like, but you can do watermarks with it as well. It just means that it will only stick to that ink. Your powder will only stick to that ink, although mine tended to stick a few other places, so I had to do a bit of powdering, shall we call it. And then I could see, as I tilt in the light, I could see a few areas that I'd actually missed when I put the powder on. So I just grabbed some more and put that on there. And I use a coffee filter just to catch all that. You can use a piece of paper folded in half, same thing. It's just so that you can then easily put that powder back into the jar afterwards. And I'm going to use a heat tool. I normally use my the one that looks like a little hairdryer. It's a proper heat tool. It's not a hairdryer, but it's the Ranger one, the heated tool, I think it's called. Tim Holtz uses it quite a lot, and I love that thing. And he actually said in one of his videos recently, I've become a bit obsessed with his videos, and I've been watching more and more of them and going back on past videos. And one of them, he actually sort of mentioned that the heat in both those tools are the same. It's just that the Ranger one, the one that looks like a hairdryer, is just slower in its dry time. So it's nice when you're working on a project and you want to dry something. It's perfect. Same amount of heat, same type of heat, but it's just slower. So I used my old school heat tool that I've had for about must be over 12 years now. So it sounds horrendous as well, so I think it might be on its way out. I'm not sure, but I'll keep it going for a bit longer and see what happens. So what I did was I actually heat embossed that onto some Bristol Smooth cardstock, and it's just a piece that I cut big enough for the stamp. And I'm using some Stampin' Up! Ink refills. So this is another way to use your ink refills as watercolors. And honestly, this drop that I'm using here, or that I'm putting here, is way too much. You'll see in a minute, there's way too much, even that tiny little drop. So a lot of it goes a long way. And what I eventually do is I'll zoom in a minute, but what I eventually do is I actually not only add some water to each one, but I also use the little wells next to it to make it even lighter, because like I say, it's still very concentrated ink in that. And excuse me, I'm using my Waffle Flower Water Media Matte, which is a great tool. If you don't have one, it's fab. The more I use it, the more I love it. So it's just one of those things, and especially if you want to do some ink blending or some watercoloring like this, those wells are very handy. So the colors that I'm using while I'm starting to do this, the colors are Lovely Lipstick, Grapefruit Grove, Call Me Clover, Pineapple Punch, sorry my eyesight's going, I'm just reading the bottles, and Blueberry Bushel. I can't even say that, seriously. And I wanted this rainbow of flowers, so I decided to use the Blueberry Bushel on the main sentiment, so the hello, and then I'm going to take the other colors, and just the green I'll use for the leaves, and then the flowers will be in the rest of the rainbow colors. And there's a couple of times I needed to make an extra color, and that's very easy to do. One of them I use a blue, and I just keep watering it down until I've got it pale enough so it's still that same blue, but it's because it's that much watered down, it's more like it looks like a different color, if that makes any sense. So excuse me. And so and then I also make a purple, and a couple of my flowers decided they had to hold hands, so you'll see that in a minute. You have to be so careful with certain colors. One of them just bled into the other one, and red on any level is going to be one of those colors. Doesn't matter what medium you're using, red seems to be that color that you've just got to be extra careful with. So I'm using now I never get the name of this thing right. This is a Derwent water brush thing. I never get the name of this thing. And there are many brands out there. I think Stampin' Up have one, and I think they call it an aqua marker, aqua something. But basically, and Tim Holtz has them as well. A lot of companies have this type of brush, and basically it's got a little barrel on it, the clear bit, and that you fill with water, and then you just use that to apply the water. You could use a paintbrush and a pot of water just as easily, and in some upcoming videos I actually do that, so it's super easy to do it that way as well. Oh, I don't know what's up with my throat today. Anyway, so I just kind of counted the flowers around and worked out that I needed another ready colored one over here, but again I'm doing this lighter so that it looks a little bit different to that first flower. And that lovely lipstick is although it's kind of a reddy color, it's kind of like it's like a reddy pink kind of color. So the more you water it down, the more pink it looks, if that makes sense. And so yeah, and also because I haven't watercolored for so long, even though I love doing it, I was finding that the more I was getting into this, the more the easier it was getting, if that makes sense. So to start with, I was a bit more sort of cautious with the water and the amount of water, and in the end I'm just like winging it and it actually works out better. So the ink flows better. You can bear in mind when each image dries, you can always go back to it and add more color. So if you started with a paler version, so say that pink one on the right hand side, you could go back to that afterwards when it was dry, make sure it's dry first, and then add some more of the same color on top of it, and it will give you that sort of depth that you might want. I didn't do any of that. I just did it really quite straightforward, really easy coloring. And you can see there's the paler blue flower that I made up. I guess made up the color, and this is the purple that I made. So the purple's easy to make. It's red and blue. So even if you only had, for example, in these colors, well, even if it's not in these colors, but in this brand, but even if you had a red, yellow, and blue, you can make your in-between colors. So you can make a green, you can make a purple, you can make pinks, things like that. So even if you've got very basic colors, you can still do this. The other way that you can do this, if it's not with a re-inker, you can use your ink pads. So all I would do with an ink pad is I would, if it's small enough, on this media mat, I could squish it into the, if it's like the 1-inch cubes, I could just squish it into the little well, and it works really well, and you can just chuck it in there. If not, just on a non-porous, or like on this media mat, on there, and then just use your water and your paintbrush, and you're away. It's the same thing. So if for example you've got the Stampin' Up ink pads but not the re-inkers to do this, then you can still do this technique with your ink pads. Obviously if your ink pad is drier, you might need to add layers just to get more of that intense color, but like I say, this is, you know, that one drop is gonna go miles. I could have done so many more, but I didn't, but I could have done so much more. Look at the amount on the right hand side there of that ink that's still sitting there, and I'm not going to use any of that. So just worth noting, when you're using your re-inkers, the smallest drop is going to go so far. So what I decided to do around the outside, just to sort of give the background a little bit of something, is I went back and I grabbed some more of that same blue, watered down again, and just very carefully going around my images. Now this is where you have to be very careful, because you'll see, although I do seem to save it somewhat, When I get near that first red flower, I accidentally went, I guess, over that embossed line, because for the most part the embossed area is going to resist the watercolor. That's what makes it really, really good, and quite nice to do. Whereas there is a bit somewhere, I can't remember where, unless I've already done it, and I actually accidentally, maybe you can't see it on camera actually, I actually dragged that red out. So I managed to fix that, so that was fine. But I don't know if you can see it on my my purple and blue flower, my pale blue flower, they're holding hands, let's just say that, because they kind of bled into each other. So I just dried that off with the hairdryer version. I'm going to call it a hairdryer, it's not a hairdryer at all. Heat tool, because the airflow's slower, so it's not going to damage my embossing powder, where I've embossed, because you can overheat that and actually burn it. And I've also then taken some Perfect Pearls, Ranger Perfect Pearls in Perfect Pearl, which is like the sort of white colour, and just spritzed all over using the nozzle of the little bottle. So now that that's all dry, what I've done is I've got the same lovely lipstick, one of the inks that we used, and I've got a card base that measures, it's an A2 size card, but it's 11 by 4 1/4, folded at 5 1/2. And then I've also used a lawn fawn stitch die to cut that image out, because I had enough space around it. I could use a die just to cut it down to the right size, rather than trying to use a paper trimmer. You can totally use a paper trimmer, it'll work just fine. And then I'm taking lovely lipstick again in the ink. Yeah, can you see a little trend here? I have to have the paper and the card and the ink and I can't help myself. I like to collect things, as my husband says. Yeah, and I've just stamped that onto some white cardstock, and I'm going to trim this out. It's a tiny image and sentiment. This is actually in that same Botanic Hello stamp set of Mama Elephants, so you do get some sentiments in there, and they're very, very cute. And I'm going to do something very, I think is kind of cute in a minute, and you'll see that at the end you'll see it, and hopefully, yeah, well, we'll see what happens. So I'm going to take just my tape runner. Now, in hindsight, because the paper did warp a little bit, because you've been watercoloring, so any watercolor or anything like that, it is going to warp a bit. So even though I've gone through a die cut machine to die cut it out, that would have helped to flatten it a little bit. Because it's still warped, a wet adhesive probably would have been better, and then to put like a load of acrylic blocks on top of it, or a book or something, and left it until the adhesive had dried, that would have worked out much better. It would have stuck better. So I actually have to go back and do a bit of finagling and get some glue in there, because it starts to lift on the sides. So wet adhesive, when in doubt, use that. So I'm just taking some foam adhesive now, just double-sided foam. You could cut some pop dot things down or whatever, onto this very small little skinny sentiment strip that I've got, and I'm going to add that to the card. And so it reads, if I remember right, oh, I've got it right here, hello. It reads, hello, I've really, really, really missed you. Yeah, and I'm using my little tweezer thingies. I love these things. I use them for just about everything. Didn't realize they're coming quite so handy, but they have. And that's, you could leave that there. I wanted to add something else to it. There's only one bit of purple on this card, and although there's, because it's a rainbow and all that, I just felt like there was a lot of blue, and sort of pinky reds and stuff like that, and a few orange, and yeah, you know what I mean, like I just felt like it needed a little bit of something. So I decided to stick a heart on here. This is just a self-adhesive it's a little purple heart. I think I got this, came with a few different colors on a sheet, and it in different sizes and glittery ones and all that, and I pretty sure I got this from Poundland, so I just cut them up and put all the same colors together in a drawer. I'll show you that in a video of my craft room when I eventually get to that, but I'll show you how I organize those. And that's it. Super simple. Super simple. Yes, you have to kind of look in the light with the embossing, because white embossing, you can't really see that. So you would have seen I sort of had to tip it up a little bit just to see, you know, where the lines were and that. So if you heat embossed this in black, or just heat embossed it in a water, you know, something you can watercolor over an ink, like a black ink or a brown ink, you would have no problem. It would be fine. You wouldn't have any need to sort of keep tilting it to the light. You'd have to be a bit more careful in the water around the edges, sorry. But it's, you know, it's still very cool and very easy to do. So this is my little thing at the end. This is for you, Mum. I love you and I miss you. Soon. We'll see each other soon. And I will see the rest of you as well in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye.